Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoyed this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Sophia was sitting in a fancy new cafe chatting with her friend Bethany. How is your faithful knight? Are you still together? Don't you get tired of messing with him? He's a pauper. To think he's just a delivery boy. Sophia was even a little offended. Bethany, stop it. Don't talk about Gilbert that way. We love each other and he's a wonderful man. And money isn't everything in life. Friend sniggered. And this is the daughter of rich people telling me. It's easy for you to say that because you don't need anything and you can afford everything. But if you lived like me, from paycheck to paycheck, you would have sent your fiancé to hell a long time ago. What do you see in him? All right, that's your business. I'll stay out of it. The girls sat for a while longer, and Bethany ran off to another boyfriend for a date, while Sophia sat for a long time, looking out the window, finishing her coffee, and remembering her childhood. Sophia's parents were wealthy people who owned a chain of gas stations and auto repair shops in the area. Her mother had been unable to get pregnant for a long time, and by the time she was 40, she had lost hope, and then a miracle happened. God sent them a child. Of course, my father and mother did not dwell in Sophia, shook on her, and gave her only the best. But at the same time, they brought her up right. They instilled important truths. Don't be greedy, share with friends, help your neighbors, and always remember that the main thing in a person is the soul. After all, her parents were not born rich, and they started from the very bottom, so they knew the price of everything. That is why Sophia, despite the fact that she lived in luxury, still grew up a kind and compassionate girl. She did not become arrogant. She went, like everyone else, to an ordinary school, then attended university on general terms, and was friends with ordinary guys. Sophia considered her childhood years to be the happiest and most carefree, and then difficult times began. First, her mother died. She had always had heart problems, and after her late birth, they only got worse. Trying not to frighten her husband and daughter, the woman often hid and concealed severe heart pains. And one day she groaned while sitting in a chair and closed her eyes forever. It was a terrible, irreplaceable grief for Sophia, and she wept and longed for her mother. Her father also turned black with grief and grew old and gray all at once. He was absent from work all day long, and after 6 months he began to be ill as well. Long trips to doctors and endless examinations gave a disappointing diagnosis. Sophia begged him to get treatment, to do chemotherapy, to fight for life, but he flatly refused. Their conversation was long, and her daughter remembered it for the rest of her life. Daddy held her hands and spoke softly. Sophia, my daughter, listen to what I'm going to tell you. I'm terminally ill, stage 4. The doctors won't give me more than 6 months. You heard it yourself, and I have a choice. Either spend that time writhing in pain in a clinic or spend it with you, my family, and the job I love. Which do you think I'll choose? My only hope for you is that while I'm still alive, I want you to get into the workflow and continue it after I'm gone, not let it die. It's my mother and I's life's work. We put so much time and effort into it. So let's start tomorrow and I'll teach you everything I know. It only seems that everything is so scary, but in fact, if you know how to properly manage the ship, it is not afraid of any storm. From that day until the last minute of his life, Sophia was practically never parted from her daddy. He helped her learn the basics of business, and on weekends, they took long walks in the park. If he was not well at all, they just sat by the fireplace and talked until late, both in a hurry to be together, knowing that soon fate would separate them forever. Daddy passed away quietly without anguish as he took the strongest painkillers. Sophia wept bitterly. She could not accept such injustice. So the girl remained a rich heiress and an orphan. At the age of 25, in order not to go crazy, Sophia began to work with great zeal. Though little people took the young girl seriously, yes, and it was very hard for her in such a short time to comprehend all the intricacies of running such a large business and learn how to manage it competently. Every day she was bombarded with a pile of problems, reports, signing documents, planning meetings, and making deals. Everything had to be taken care of. Nothing had to be missed. Decisions had to be made instantly and correctly. It was during this period of her life that Sophia met Gilbert. It was ridiculously trivial. The guy worked as a courier, and one day he brought a pizza and a set lunch to Sophia's workplace, to her order. A casual conversation ensued word for word. Their gazes met, and at that moment there was some kind of magic, chemistry, and the young people felt an inexplicable thrill and goosebumps. Gilbert timidly asked Sophia for the phone and asked her out. The boy was very worried because he was from an ordinary, even one could say poor family, and was well aware that this beautiful brown-eyed girl who he liked so much was a bird of a very high flight. Gilbert did not know what to surprise Sophia with, because he did not have money for expensive restaurants, so he took her for a walk to the river outside the city. He had known very beautiful places since childhood. You can't help but admire them. Fortunately, Sophia was delighted, took a lot of pictures of the scenery, and rejoiced like a child. God, what a beauty! Just look at how purple the sausage is. Tomorrow there will probably be a strong wind, and the water is overflowing. Look how the fish are splashing. It's an evening bite. You know, Gilbert, it's been so long since I've been outdoors. My parents leaving and the enormous amount of work has been so overwhelming that I've already forgotten what it's like to just go for a walk. Thank you for a wonderful evening. I really enjoyed it. Now it's my turn to surprise you. Next weekend, we're going to an exhibition of the famous avant-garde artist Silantiev. I've wanted to see his work for a long time. Gilbert led the girl home and shyly kissed her on the cheek. Then he said quietly, I like you a lot, Sophia. I like you madly, but I'm a little embarrassed. After all, you're rich and I'm a pauper by your standards. Can we be together? I can't give you everything you're used to. Sophia smiled. My father taught me from childhood that you should see a person's soul above all else and not measure everyone only by money. And I can see, Gilbert, that you're a good man. And I can see, Gilbert, that you're a good man, and I like you a lot, too. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, and then we'll see. That's how the couple started to meet. They talked and talked a lot. The guy talked about his childhood. For as long as I can remember, we have lived very poor. My mother worked in the kitchen all her life in the school cafeteria, and my father was a laborer at a construction site. My parents didn't get much. The only thing my mother sometimes brought from work was groceries. I was an only child in the family, but all the time I had the feeling that I was superfluous, not needed and not loved. My mother never gave me a hug once in a while. My mother never gave me a hug once in a while. My father was always muttering and was always displeased about something. They didn't seem to hurt me, but they didn't show me as much love as I saw in my friends' families. This always upset me a lot. I tried to prove to my parents that I was worthy of their love. I was an excellent student. I was number one in running at school. I started earning a part-time job early on, even quietly taking on the task of loading wagons, even though I was still a minor. I didn't hide the money. I gave it to my parents, only left a little for my pocket money and clothes. Now I'm a part-time student at university, and I work as a courier. They pay me well, and I didn't look anything like my parents. They were both short and blonde, and I was about 2 meters tall and had pitch black hair. Sophia also shared her memories with her fiancé. I, on the contrary, was my father's copy, exactly the same, only my mother's hair was left over. My parents not only loved me, they adored me. Sometimes I was even mad, not understanding how important it was. Only now, when I was left without my parents, I realized how much love, warmth, and affection they gave me, and how much I miss them now. Now I'm mastering my father's business, but so far it's not going well. It's hard for me to do it all. Sophia felt so good and easy with Gilbert, and their relationship grew closer and warmer despite the difference in social status. But in an instant, everything changed. Sophia was on her way home from work when she received a call from the hospital. "Good afternoon. Are you Sophia? Gilbert gave us your number before he was taken away for surgery." Sophia went pale and braked sharply on the side of the road, even feeling sick. "God, Gilbert, what's wrong with him? What kind of surgery?" Tanya, the girl, calmly replied. "A young man was attacked right in the middle of the street. A fight ensued, and one of the attackers wounded Gilbert in the leg. Eyewitnesses called an ambulance and the police, and the guy was taken to us, to the regional hospital. The wound was very deep. We had to do an emergency surgery. But don't worry, the artery is not nicked. He will live. I'll give you the number of the room and the ward." Sophia rushed unawares to the hospital, worried about Gilbert, who had attacked him, and why. Everything was still unclear. When the girl was allowed to see her lover, he was still unconscious from the anesthesia. Gilbert was rushing around on the bed, shouting out strange combinations of numbers. Gilbert mumbled these numbers like a memorized cheat sheet many more times without stopping. Sophia was taken aback, and out of interest, she even wrote it all down on a piece of paper. What were these numbers? The phone number is too long. The card number too. Very strange. 2 hours later, the guy finally came to his senses and was very happy to see his fiancée. "Hello, Sophia. Are you here? You came to see me after all." "Thank you. It's a pleasure." The girl smiled and kissed Gilbert. "How are you? Does your leg hurt a lot?" "It's bearable now, thanks to Passers-by and doctors otherwise. I don't know what would have happened." "My God, what happened, my love? Tell me. Because I still don't understand. Who attacked you? Do you know them?" Gilbert shrugged his shoulders. "That's the thing, I can't figure it out myself. The main thing is, I had a bag with the orders. They did not touch it, which is not like a yard hooligans. They would first steal all the goods. But these guys came out of nowhere, 2 of them, in masks and hoods. I didn't even know what they were after. They didn't try to beat me up first, but to grab me and throw me in the car. Well, I grew up on the street, and I know how to fight pretty well too, so I fought back briskly. I shout to them, 'What do you want? Leave me alone.' And they told me back, 'We need you, you bastard, to either remember everything or forget everything.' What it means, I never understood. I think they mixed me up with someone else, most likely. I swear to you, I have no debts, no enemies, and my job is not, criminal. Pizza and rolls don't get you killed yet." Sophia frowned even more. "Gilbert, when you were delirious after the anesthesia, you kept repeating these numbers clearly and without mistakes. What's the combination?" The guy rounded his eyes and shook his head. "I don't know. This is the first time I've heard you say that. Maybe I dreamt something. I don't remember." Sophia shook her head. "It's all very strange, my love. I'm just worried. I think those numbers you've been repeating in the attack have something to do with it. Look, why don't we see a therapist? Maybe he can help you remember things." "I'm so curious. What's going on here?" Gilbert agreed. "Maybe you're right, but it's all paid, and I don't have a lot of money, and I'll be on sick leave now. But I swear to you, I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. I have never lied to you. Don't even think about it." Sophia switched the conversation to another topic and began to ask her fiancé about his health. She decided it was really not the best time to interrogate him, and she had other things to think about. She visited the boy in the hospital every day, brought him homemade food and fruit, and wondered why Gilbert's parents didn't visit him. Once his father dropped in for a second, asked how he was, and then left, as if he really wasn't his own son. The girl couldn't get enough of those numbers, so a month later she went with Gilbert to see a specialist. The boy was visibly nervous. "What if I remember something terrible? Am I a criminal, or have I done something bad to someone? It's kind of scary, to be honest. The doctor reassured the boy, I'm going to put you in a state of deep hypnosis, ask you some questions, and you answer. If you see something scary and want to stop the experiment, say stop and I'll bring you out of the trance. Believe me, it's the only way to find out how you got those numbers so deeply imprinted in your memory. Gilbert agreed, took a deep breath and closed his eyes, leaned back on the leather couch. He heard the therapist's voice. Gilbert, I'm going to count to 10, and you're going to drift off to sleep. Now 1, 2, 3. Your eyelids are getting heavy. Let yourself relax completely. You're nice and relaxed. So, Gilbert, you're a little boy. What do you see? Repeat after me the numbers. And the doctor read out that weird combination a couple of times. Suddenly the boy clearly saw a picture from his childhood. He is sitting on his father's lap. He is about 4 years old. He was wearing a knitted cap with a pom-pom on it, and he was holding a bear cub with buttons instead of eyes. Except that it doesn't look like his father. A tall, mustachioed, blue-eyed man, smelling of tobacco, hugs him affectionately and speaks in his ear. Son, here's the thing, I have to go away for a long time. For work, and you have to learn this like a poem by heart. Repeat after me, my little one. Heather and now the numbers. 418. And they repeated the combination of these numbers together for a long time, and his father praised him for doing a great job and remembering everything quickly. And then suddenly, like in a movie, the next frame came before my eyes. Gilbert is crying, sobbing, screaming, Daddy, don't go away. Don't leave me. You'll be back soon, won't you? He runs along the asphalt path between the entrances trying to catch up with his daddy, then falls and hurts his knee, and is immediately picked up by someone's female arms. Gilbert did not realize that he was saying all this aloud and crying not in his memories, but in reality as well. Sophia was frightened by his condition and showed the doctor a sign that enough is enough. Let him stop this experiment. It was impossible to watch the boy beating hysterically and calling for his father. When Gilbert woke up, he didn't immediately realize where he was. He drew tears and twisted his head around, his heart racing and his pulse racing. The man I called father in my memories is not the same man at all. He was tall and shoulder, high and black-haired like me now, and had a mustache. So I grew up in someone else's family. But how did it happen? I am dizzy. Specialist added, I think all these questions should be asked of your parents who raised you. They obviously know the answers. I mean, you came into their family somehow, right? Of course you could do a couple more sessions and remember everything in more detail. But you were a young child, and now you remember the most vivid moments. There may not be any others. The couple thanked the doctor and went home. Gilbert couldn't recover from the experience all the way home. You know, Sophia, I distinctly remembered that feeling of great love and trust in that very man. And I also remembered his smell. Dad always smelled of tobacco and strong, tart male perfume. There was nothing even close to what I had ever felt from my parents. I swear it. But what happened? Why had I forgotten all that? Let's go to my parents tomorrow. I want and have the right to know the truth about my birth. You have no idea what is going on in my heart. Now I'm sure that my father was not my real father. There was always a cold between us, and my mother was stingy with affection too. After all, it's not for nothing. Sophia too was agitated. You know, I also noticed that your father, when he came to the hospital, was somehow dry with you like a stranger. Something's not right. I can smell it on your nose. And then there's that word Heather you said before the number combination. There's only a bank with that name in our town. So those numbers must be a code or an account number. I have an old friend of my father's who works there, and we can find out tomorrow. Now come on, honey, let's have a little distraction. Let's watch a comedy as usual, with peanuts, cuddling, The guy pulled his bride to him and kissed her hotly. "All right. Sophia, how much I love you. You're the only one who understands me. No one else. You and I are two halves, I'm sure." The next morning, Sophia put all her business aside and went to see Marcus, a very good friend of Papa's, the banker at Verisk Bank. What was her surprise when he informed her that there was indeed a safe deposit box in the vault with a number that her lover kept repeating. The box had been rented over 20 years ago and paid for years in advance. What was inside it, of course, was unknown. What a twist. So Gilbert knows the box number, but doesn't remember it himself. That doesn't make any sense. Either he's faking it or something really happened that made him forget those numbers. And in the state of anesthesia and stress, they came out of his subconscious. She put the conversation with Gilbert aside for later and went to his house first thing. The groom's parents were surprised to see them both on the doorstep. The mother wailed, "Hello, son. Do we have company? Why didn't you tell me? I would have cooked something delicious. Come on, Sophia, have a seat." But the guy started right away, without warning. "Mom, Dad, I have a serious and not very pleasant conversation to have with you. Yesterday I had a therapist, a session of hypnosis, and I remembered that I had a different native father when I was a child. I want to know the truth. Who am I really?" Mom twitched and dropped the cup from her hands, began to wail and dog the shards with a broom. Father said sharply, "Don't talk nonsense, son. What therapist? Are you full of henbane? You scared the shit out of your mother? You're our son, period. We raised you all your life." But then Sophia cut in. "Listen, Victor. There's no point in falling back on us. We're not accusing you of anything. Just get it right. Gilbert has a right to know who his real parents are. And if you love your son even a little bit, then please tell the truth. And tell it like it really happened." Victor slowly walked to the window, sighed heavily, and began his story. "I guess you're right. It's time to tell it like it is. Although there's not much to tell. In the doldrums of the 90s, a businessman and his young son moved into our neighborhood. They lived in apartment 30T. Oh, and his name was Byron Richetola. He had been involved in commerce all his life, but at first he just did quarters and cars, bought them out cheaply, did repairs, resold them, and that's how he got around. But in those troubled times, he somehow rose quickly and began to make millions, setting up a firm like Financial Palisades or something else. I know nothing about it. The revenues were enormous, and the depositors were happy at first. They received good interest. Then, at one point, everything began to fall apart, and he started having serious problems. We never talked to him. We just said a few words at the doorway, and that was it. He was black as a sheet. One day, my wife and I came home from work and sat down to dinner. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. When we opened the door, the neighbor was standing there, holding his little boy's hand, and he came in quickly and said, "Hello, Victor. There's something to do here. You can take your son in for a while, a month or two, no more. My wife died in childbirth, and I'm the only one raising Gilbert. And now I'm being hunted like a wolf, and the police are looking for me, and my brothers are hunting me, and I feel they'll either kill me or lock me up. I'm in a lot of trouble with this company. I'm not happy about it, so I want to go abroad and wait it out. And when things calm down, I'll come back and get Gilbert. Don't think I'm just doing this here for expenses. I'll send you more every month. My son's quiet. He likes ice cream and apple pie. But don't hurt him. He's my most precious possession. Well, do you agree?" My wife and I looked at each other and agreed. We really needed the money, and I felt sorry for the child. Because he would get in a gangster showdown, we'll suffer more. Byron pressed his son goodbye, whispered something to him, then waved his hand and ran down the stairs, and before we knew it, Gilbert, you were after him. You ran out of the staircase, screamed so wildly, fell down, almost broke down, and we could hardly catch up with you to calm you down. That's how you came to live with us. And you liked to babble on and on about some numbers, and my wife and I couldn't figure out what it was all about. It was just gibberish. You cried a lot, were sad and bored, waiting at the window for Daddy. At first you were snapping at us and wouldn't take it for granted. But a month, 2, 6 months passed, and Byron disappeared without a trace. At first he really did send money, but then he vanished into thin air. We weren't glad we agreed. After all, you had to go to school in the fall, and how could we give you away? You're a stranger to us. And then everything was solved by itself. We bought you a second-hand bicycle with the money we sent you. We wanted to make you happy. You were so happy. You were so happy you started to learn, and you fell badly, hit your head hard, to the point of concussion. You even lost consciousness. It took a long time to come to your senses. Well, we were frightened, nursed you back to health. We kept asking you, "How are you, my son?" And you came to your senses and suddenly started calling us Daddy and Mommy, and I guess you forgot everything after the fall. And you stopped minting those stupid numbers like a wind-up. So we were even glad that you had forgotten them. One day my wife and I decided that we had no children of our own, and decided to raise you as our own son, since fate itself had decided so for us. My wife had a relative at the passport office, Aunt Diana, who helped us with the documents secretly, and from now on you were Gilbert. We were afraid, of course, because it was a dark case. What if your father came back? But as the years went by, Byron never showed up, alive or not, we don't know. We gradually got used to you, grew fond of you, and tried our best to make you no worse than others. I know we live poorly, but not everyone can be rich. I understand that it was probably not right. It turns out that someone else's child was appropriated, and even not quite legally. But on the other hand, if we had put you in an orphanage, would you have been better off there? So don't hold it against your mother and me, son. We meant well. Gilbert was shocked and in some kind of prostration. He now looked at his parents, whom he had so often resented since childhood, in a very different way. When he found out what had happened, he was ready to kiss their hands. If not for them, he would have grown up in an orphanage, hungry and not knowing what a family was. And his father, how could he? Why hadn't he come back for him? What had happened to him anyway? Was he alive or had he died long ago? All these thoughts raced through his head, jumping from one to the other. The mother looked at her son the whole time, remained silent, then asked, "You're all angry, aren't you? You hate me and Daddy. You know, son, I don't regret anything. I may not be a perfect mother, and it took me a long time to get used to you, to adapt to your character. But still, my life was not in vain. I used to run out of work knowing that you were hungry during detention, bringing you a warm cutlet with macaroni and a pie from the kitchen in a bag. I didn't eat it myself, I saved it for you, and I proudly told my friends that my son was the best in school. Yes, we didn't give you much, but we gave everything we could." Gilbert couldn't stand it, jumped up from his chair and hugged his mother, perhaps for the first time so tenderly and sincerely, and she hugged him, both crying profusely and not being able to open their embrace for long. The boy whispered to her, "You're right, Mommy. I often resented you as a child. I was stupid. It seemed to me that you don't love me enough, praise me enough, buy me little. Only now, when I know the truth, I understand that you did the noble thing. You did not abandon a child who was not your own. You did not give him up in an orphanage, but you raised him as your own son. Thank you. I bow to you. I didn't have expensive toys or fancy things, and the hell with it. But I lived like all normal kids in a family. I slept in my own bed, went to a regular school, and ate homemade soup. I didn't starve to death in an institution. I'm not angry with you. No, but rather with my own father. I don't understand why he didn't come back for me. Didn't he? How can you take your son to strangers and leave him there forever? It's sacrilegious." Victor sighed. "You don't get so hot, son. I was mad at Byron too for a long time. And maybe that's why I looked at you differently. It was hard for us to get you up on your 3 kopecks, and that's for sure. But those were bad times. Every day there was a gang shootout. Maybe he's not even alive anymore. Who knows? I think if he were alive, he'd have come back for you. Your father was a hot man. He could have crossed someone. He said that everyone was after him. He loved you very much. Don't doubt it. I saw tears in his eyes. He was tearing you from him alive, as if he was cutting the umbilical cord. Gilbert said a warm goodbye to his parents, and everyone was relieved that there were no more secrets or reticences between them. But Sophia, curious by nature, didn't even stop there. How about that, Gilbert? Just like in my favorite movie, Detective Hampton. So you're not a pauper. You're the son of a businessman named Byron. Oh boy, we've got to find out where your father is. The guy sighed. I think Dad is dead. Otherwise, why hasn't he been heard from in all these years? His enemies must have found him after all. And how do we know? It's been a long time. The girl jumped up and down. What an old-fashioned man you are, Gilbert. Then what are detective agencies for? It's what they do. They unravel complicated stories. They're paid a lot of money for that, by the way. The guy got even more sad. Exactly. Where am I going to get them? I just got off work, and my paycheck isn't due for another week. And will it be enough to pay for detective services? Sophia reassured him. Gilbert, stop it. You're just measuring everything by money again. Money isn't important to me. I've told you 100 times. It's more important to get to the truth and find out where Daddy is. Since I'm the one who started to unravel this tangle, I'll see it through to the end. A month passed. Life went on as usual. Gilbert still worked as a courier, and Sophia tried to run her father's business. But it was getting worse, and the company was barely keeping afloat. The competitors were already wringing their hands, and everyone was waiting for that snot-nosed girl to give up and sell the empire. At last, Sophia received a call from the detective agency, inviting her and Gilbert to a meeting. The couple went immediately to the address, and the boy was uneasy. What would they tell him now? Was his father alive or dead a long time ago? And if he was alive, was it worth going out with him? What would I tell him? What would I tell him? Why did you leave me? It seems silly after decades. An elderly full detective with a funny last name, Babe, sat our heroes in chairs and began to tell. I'm sorry for the delay, but we first went on a false trail because you said that my father might be dead or abroad. And the first thing we did was to try those 2 options, and it did not work at all. But we managed to find your father in the end. Byron is alive but very sick, is in a hospice, and according to the doctors, he doesn't have long to live. It's in the next town on the outskirts of town. It's not a place everyone can stand. I'll write you all the coordinates, and then it's up to you to see him or not. I did my job. Gilbert was overturned in a split second. His doubts vanished, and he looked pleadingly at Sophia and whispered, I'm going. I want to see my daddy. I can't forgive myself if he dies, and we never meet. The detective said the place was awful. Why don't you stay home? Sophia turned her head stubbornly. No way. I'm with you. I won't be intimidated by difficulties, and I won't leave you without support. We're together, aren't we? It's a long drive. We'll leave tomorrow morning. It was still dark when the boys set out in the car. It was indeed a long drive, and the weather was overcast and rainy, and the boy's mood was sad and gloomy. And when he approached the dull, shabby walls of the hospice, it was clear that this godforsaken institution clearly had not been financed for a long time. But that was just the beginning. When Sophia and Gilbert stepped inside, the horrible smell of medicine, sweat, and unwashed bodies knocked them over from the very threshold. There was sighing and moaning coming from the rooms. Even the walls seemed to be drenched with pain and suffering. An elderly and fidgety doctor when he found out who they had come to see, silently pointed to their room and muttered, "The second bunk on the left." And don't look at me like that. I'm not God. We have one nurse for every 50 of them. No one wants to work for pennies in a dump like this. This is not a private boarding house. This is not a private boarding house. There are ex-convicts and the elderly who don't care about their relatives. I do what I can. I try to get the department to give them more painkillers and diapers. But you know what I mean. Gilbert cautiously opened the door of the room. Along the walls were 4 bunks each. In the spot indicated lay a shriveled, long, unshaven, wretched old man, dried out like an immortal cachet. He was staring at a single point on the rugged, leaking ceiling and wrinkling his nose. The sight was so frightening that Sophia couldn't stand it and jumped out into the hallway. Gilbert got over himself, though, and walked over to the bed. The boy asked timidly, "Dad, is that you? Do you recognize me? I'm Gilbert, your son." The old man's face suddenly brightened up. He turned his head vividly and even tried to smile. His eyes lit up. "Gilbert, my son, this can't be happening. Oh my God, we meet at last. How did you find me? Oh, how handsome you've grown. My breed, a slant in the shoulders." Tears welled up in the old man's eyes, and he tried to wipe them away with a dry, skinny hand. Gilbert immediately recognized his father in his voice, in his eyes, and those childhood memories came flooding back into his head. And the boy asked, "What happened to you? And why didn't you pick me up at the first offs? I was waiting for you. Or you didn't need me, did you? Tell me the truth." Gilbert almost screamed, unable to contain his emotions. Father lowered his eyes. "I'm very ashamed, son, and there's nothing to hide. When I gave you to my neighbor, I thought I'd really go abroad for a couple of months. I made a mess of things back then. It was a daring business, wasn't it? That's what I paid for. They took me right to the station and locked me up for 10 years. And then, when I got out of jail, a hardened convict, I thought, why do you need me? I saw you sneaking around with Victor and Marta, and I didn't go near you. Didn't interfere. Anyway, I chickened out at the very last moment. But the neighbors were good. They kept their word. And even though they didn't live rich, they were good, honest, non-drinkers. I thought you'd forgotten all about me. Then again, I left you a fortune of money. I thought you wouldn't be poor with it. At first I was completely lost. I even started drinking. But I realized it in time. My health failed me. Then I met Alice. We got together. Some of the old savings were still there. And she has a son, Petya. Your age. What a horrible kid. He was always rude to me. He didn't consider me a human being. They got me for 3 years, shook all my money out of me, and staged an accident. They thought I'd crashed to death, but I jumped out of the car. But I was broken all over. I was an invalid. Alice brought me here and drove off somewhere. I told her in anger that I have in Varesk a huge sum of money, and it belongs only to my own son, not you. I thought that you must have taken the money long ago, and that Alice knew nothing about you. But that didn't stop her either. She didn't believe me, dumped me like unwanted furniture at the dump, and disappeared. So I've been here for 6 months. It's okay. I don't have long to suffer. I already have bed sores, fistulas, and a lot more. I wish I could die sooner. I don't have the strength to lie in my own puddle, like a lapdog. No one here cares about anyone. My son cried and cried out, "What money, Father? I didn't know anything about your millions. And even if I had known, how could I have taken it at such a young age? And over the years I've forgotten everything. Do you know how hard our life was? They used to tease me at school as a pauper. I used to dye my sneakers black with a felt-tip pen when they turned from white into something unintelligible, and my mother simply couldn't buy me new ones." Byron was in shock. "Wait, how could you not know? You remembered the name of the bank and the number of the deposit box by heart. Even if you woke me up at night. Gilbert swallowed his tears because I fell off my bike and had a bad concussion. So I forgot everything. And you too. I've been thinking all my life that my father and mother were kindred to me. And I wondered why I didn't look like them, and why they didn't look like them, and why they didn't like me. And recently I was attacked by punk kids in the street. I was shot in the leg, and I even had to have an operation. I also had a hypnosis session and remembered everything. How you made me learn those numbers and how I ran after you, screaming for you not to leave me. Do you even remember that? That's how I found out that my father wasn't my father. Although in fact you don't know who's more my father, you or Victor. At least he did not abandon me or put me in an orphanage or cut someone else's child out of my life. But he dragged me through my whole life, gave what he could and kept quiet. How could you do that, Dad? What for? I'm your own son. Wouldn't you at least try to find out how I live? What's wrong with me? The elderly man wept softly, his conscience burning with hot iron. He suddenly cried out with the last of his strength. Yeah, son, you are right about everything. I've made 1,000 mistakes and lived a foolish, unworthy life, and I'm sorry for it. But what can I change now? That's enough. You've seen me, you've told me everything. I've apologized. Now go away. I don't want you to remember me like this, an infirm, helpless invalid, rotting in diapers. Goodbye, son. Take the money. It's rightfully yours. And don't come here again. I don't want to. Gilbert didn't know what to say, so he stormed out of the room. He looked for Sophia, who had just come out of the doctor's office. He shouted angrily, his voice breaking down in tears. Let's get out of here. Hurry up. Sophia looked at him in bewilderment and got behind the wheel. Gilbert? Explain to me what happened. Did you have a fight with your father? What did you talk about? Wild passions raged inside the guy. He almost screamed again. I told him everything and asked him why he left me. I thought he had a good reason. And it turns out he saw me and didn't come near me. He was just being a coward. Can you imagine? Then he drank a lot, lived with a woman and her stepson, spent money on them. But they soon left him, poor and miserable. So, should I pity him now and forgive him? And him, how has he lived, eaten, slept all these years? He didn't give a damn about me. He didn't think I took the goddamn millions and didn't need anything. And just to see his child, to hold him, to raise him, isn't that all that matters? And at the end, he also said he was remorseful, but that I shouldn't go to him. He doesn't want me to see him like that. So what? It's no big deal. Gilbert expected Sophia to understand and support him now, as she always did. But he was wrong. The bride frowned and suddenly responded sharply and emotionally. You're wrong, honey, and you're behaving exactly like a naughty little child with those unspoken childish resentments boiling up inside you now. But you're all grown up now, Gilbert. And yes, I think you ought to forgive your father and go to pieces, but try to get him out of the clutches of death. Why? Because he's your daddy. Whatever he was, good or bad, it's not for you to judge him. You're not God. Yes, your father did a lot of things, and I think he repented a long time ago. And now what? Are you going to leave your own man to die within these awful walls? I spoke to the doctor. He says there is not much chance, but there is a chance. We could try to put him in a good clinic for a checkup, and maybe he could even walk. There is a lot of time lost, though. He was just not getting any work done. It's a joke lying there like a vegetable with broken bones. Think about it. You'll be able to eat and sleep comfortably now, knowing he's here in pain. It was as if Gilbert had been given a sobering slap in the face. He suddenly looked at everything differently. The boy rubbed his temples and thought, why on earth was he attacking his father? After all, he was in enough pain and probably terribly ashamed. And he was adding fuel to the fire all the time. It turns out as if the son came to his father to bite him more painfully. The guy opened the car door and whispered to Sophia, "I will now." The girl exhaled and folded her hands in the form of a prayer, looked up gratefully and whispered, "Thank God, I think I got it." Gilbert entered the room again. His father lay facing the wall, sobbing softly. The son's heart failed, and he instinctively ran up to the man and stroked him timidly on the shoulder. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry. I've had a lot on my mind over the years. And I love you so much, and I missed you so much. I'm not going anywhere, and I'll get you out of here. You hear? You just live, please. I need you. Do you hear? I'll run to the drugstore right away. I'll be right there, and then I'll wash you and change your bed. I don't want you to lie in the mud like that. You're not angry anymore." Father hugged his son so tightly, tears raining down his unshaven, prickly cheeks, and he whispered, "Thank you, my son, for being you. Thank you, honey. I needed those words from you so badly. Forgive me, my darling." Gilbert and Sophia bought everything they needed, and the first thing they did was help the infirm man. They washed him, changed his pajamas and linens for new, crisp ones, and fed him for the first time in a long time in a human way. The son shaved his father reverently and carefully, while Sophia held the basin of water. There were tears in Byron's eyes from such touching care. The wounds that had been smeared with the expensive anesthetic ointment were no longer so sore, and he breathed a sigh of relief for the first time since he had been here. Until the couple resolved the issue of moving Byron to another clinic, Sophia paid the head physician generously and got Gilbert's father a private room and special care. Now the staff ran around him instead of passing him by as if he were a nobody, an empty space. A week later, Sophia, through influential friends of her late father, found a good professor who undertook to operate on an almost hopeless patient. The operation was extremely difficult and dangerous, but fortunately everything turned out well, and the prognosis was not bad. Gilbert dropped everything and sat with his father in the hospital around the clock. He literally taught him to eat again, move his arms and legs, gave him massages, and taught him to walk one step at a time. The care, attention, competent treatment, and good nutrition did their job, and after a couple of months the man was simply unrecognizable. From a decrepit, haggard, bedridden invalid, Byron turned into a well-fed man with a blush on his cheeks. Sophia had talked to Gilbert's father a lot too, and it turned out that he was an excellent businessman, since he had managed to build up an empire. Only he had taken an unfortunate risk. But thanks to his sound advice, things had improved considerably in the company of her son's fiancé, and now she often consulted him before making a deal. When Gilbert's father finally recovered, Sophia took Byron to her mansion, and now the three of them lived there. The man went to the bank and took the money out of the safe deposit box, and from that day on, they could all live comfortably for many years. Sophia's girlfriends didn't sympathize with her for getting involved with a beggar, but envied her for finding out that her Gilbert was the son of a millionaire. And her father began to teach Gilbert the basics of business, and soon both men were successfully working in Sophia's company, Byron as a consultant and Gilbert as the general manager. And Sophia finally breathed a sigh of relief, for she no longer had to carry that heavy stone alone, and wondered how to save the company. After all, business is not a woman's business. Byron couldn't stop wondering who had attacked Gilbert. He was sure it was the work of his good-for-nothing stepson. There was no one else, so he decided to call the rascal for a frank talk, having learned that he was now in the city, in the clubs, squandering his money. Gilbert, finding out what his father was up to, began to dissuade him. "Dad, why are you doing all this? You don't have to figure it out. All's well that ends well. God be with him. Let him live. It'll be on his conscience." But the stubborn Byron twisted his head. "You don't understand, son. I want to look him in the eyes, and I'll understand everything at once. Petya doesn't know how to lie very well. He just bluffs." Gilbert sighed. "Then I'm with you, just so you know. I won't let you go anywhere else alone. Father and son stood guard under the nightclub until almost morning. It was getting light outside when Sheenan fell out half-drunk and tried to hail a cab. Just then, two men approached him from two sides. They took him under their arms and whispered quietly, "There's the cab, Shannon. Let's go. It's a breeze." Byron pushed his stepson into the car and snapped the door shut. Patika screamed wildly and tried to get out. "Look at you, you survived, you old fart. I thought you'd been rotting in the damp ground for a long time. And your son turned out to be a survivor, the same breed. You got away with it, you got away with it, you got off easy. Let go of me. You can't prove anything anyway." I was wearing a mask. Byron and Gilbert looked stunned at the rascal. The guy asked, "Say, why did you attack me in the first place? What did you want from me?" Patika laughed unkindly. "Know what? I heard my mother's stepfather shouting that there was a huge amount in the bank. He even said the name of the bank, and I remembered. And then made inquiries through friends, and found out that the box is still rented there. So I decided to kidnap my son and torture him to give him the money. Or would have brought him to the hospice, blackmailed him that I would kill him, no matter how, and would have told him where the money had gone. But it didn't work. The bastard dodged it." Byron couldn't stand it and hit his stepson with all his might. He had already raised his hand for another blow, but Gilbert stopped his father. "Don't, Daddy, don't get your hands dirty. We got what we wanted, didn't we? Let him go on his merry way. He'll end up bad enough as it is. I asked around at the club. He's in gambling debts, and he's got creditors on his heels as it is. Get out of here, smart guy, and calm down. We've already withdrawn the money." Shannon was thrown out of the car. He was slapping his bruised jaw and hissing angrily. "Wait a minute. I'm going to get you. I'll get you." 6 months passed and life went on. Gilbert and Sophia married modestly. They both didn't want to make a fuss, and the girl was expecting a child. Byron couldn't be happy that he was soon to be a grandfather. He wanted to give his grandson everything his son was missing and to babysit and coddle him. With foster parents, the family communicated well. They often went to visit them. They did not forget them. After all, they had raised Gilbert, no matter how hard it had been for them. One day a bell rang at the mansion. Surprised, Byron opened the door. On the threshold stood Alice, his former roommate. The woman looked very bad, sobbing and gibbering. "Byron, woe has come. Help me, I beg you. Shannon's been killed. He was driving with the boys at night, and he hit a pole. He's had 3 surgeries. The doctors say he'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. What am I gonna do? Give me some money, please. I don't even have any money left for medicine. That's my son." The man just grinned. "There must be a judgment of God. Do you want money? You've already robbed me of everything, haven't you? You say he's going to be a wheelchair user. Didn't you send me to a hospice in the same condition, to rot alive? And you have the conscience to come to me and beg. Not only that, but your Shannon tried to kill my son, and by some miracle he didn't. He laughed in my eyes, the bastard, and grieved that I was still alive. And I'm alive, Alice. Only thanks to Gilbert, my own son and his wife. They found me and brought me out. Spoon, fed me, pulled me from the other side of the world. And where have you been? No, Alice, I won't help you. You're lucky I didn't report you to the police, or they'll put your Shannon in jail too." The woman left with nothing to eat. She knew that Byron was right about everything, and there was no forgiveness for her and her son. But here too, Sophia surprised everyone. She had heard all about it from the men at dinner. Byron was so indignant, so shouting that Alice was a sneaky snake and had done this to him and now let her torment her wretch. The girl found Alice and made an appointment to see her. She thought she was going to see a burnt-out bitch, but in front of her sat her grief-stricken mother. She asked for forgiveness. It was only now that I realized what Petya and I had done, and that it was all a lesson and a punishment for us. We were really hard on Byron, and he did us so much good. And I understand that he'll never forgive me, but you have no idea how hard it is to watch your child suffer. You can't change Shannon. I've misjudged him. I've taught him the wrong things. But he's in so much pain. He's screaming, and I don't know how to help. Sophia listened and did not interrupt, then said quietly, I don't know why I'm here and why I'm talking to you. If my husband or father-in-law found out, they wouldn't understand. But I'm about to become a mother myself, and I feel sorry for you in a woman's way. I will transfer money to your account, enough to transfer your son to a paid hospice, or to buy a good quality wheelchair and the necessary medicine. And then it's up to you. I'm sorry, I have to go. Goodbye. Alice sobbed and fell to her knees. You're a saint. I'll pray for you. Thank you, Sophia. Somehow, Sophia felt light in her heart. She knew for sure that she was doing the right thing, though she could not even explain it to herself. She had been brought up that way. She could not pass by someone else's misfortune, and it was a credit to her parents that they had raised such a wonderful and merciful daughter. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.